I was supposed to short behind you. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be able to introduce Emily this morning. Emily began her journey of mindfulness and meditation at the age of 17 when she lived in Thailand as a Rotary Youth Exchange student. Since then, she's continued to explore the world through international teaching in countries like South Korea, Italy, Vietnam, and most recently, China. In her latest position as kindergarten team lead and teacher at the Canadian International School, Beijing, Emily developed a strong passion for social emotional learning through wellness and mindfulness as a way of helping her students overcome the challenge of COVID-19, the global pandemic. And I tell you, I've had a couple of conversations via email with Emily while she was over there, and it's a very interesting area, and I hope that you do pursue it. So I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
I am.
Hi. So this is going to be less of a presentation and more of a discussion. I feel like that's how this should go, especially when it comes to mindfulness. That's less of you listening to people and more of you thinking about yourself and being more mindful in the moment. So first of all, I'd like to ask a question. What do you think mindfulness is? What comes to your mind when you hear the word mindful? I'm a teacher, so I ask questions.
Caring about others, first yourself, but caring about others.
Yeah.
Being mindful.
Exactly, caring about others, yourself.
You're cognitively aware of what's going on in other people's lives and in their surroundings.
Even if you don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, definitely, yes.
I was just say being present in the moment, not thinking about other things you have to do later in the day and being engaged right now.
Right in the moment, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Awesome, those are all great examples of mindfulness, and mindfulness is basically anything where you're cognitive, you're aware of what's happening, you're present in the moment, you're thinking of other people, you're thinking of yourself. And this is something that kids are just not being taught. Kids go to school, they're being taught academics, they're being filled with information, but they're not being taught how to think about themselves, and they're not being taught how to think about others. That empathy is something that we need, and especially during this pandemic. And I've seen a lot of what the pandemic has done for little kids every day in my classroom. So first, I would like us to just take a moment and breathe. So if you like, you can close your eyes. You don't have to close your eyes if that makes you feel uncomfortable. You can place a hand on your heart and a hand on your belly if you like. And we're just going to take a breath in through our nose and a breath out through our nose. Breathing in through your nose and out. Open our eyes. I begin every class with breath. And I do it a lot longer than that, but I think that that's a great way for my students to know what our classroom environment is going to be like. And it's a great way for them to feel the breath and feel where they're at. So why did I decide to do this? Well, thank you, Rotary. I went to Thailand when I was 17. So thanks to this wonderful organization, and I had the chance to live in a Buddhist country that is very, very present. And it opened my eyes to what it means to sit in the moment, and opened my eyes to being in the moment. And from there, and through all of my travels, I realized that life is rushed. Everything is rushed. I don't want to do that to my students. I don't want my kids to feel like they have to just rush through life. They need to know what it's like to be a kid. They need to understand how they feel. And if they do, they're going to change their future. If they understand how they feel, they will change the future. So 2021, I went back to China. I had 25 5-year-olds come into my classroom, and there was a million emotions happening. And I looked at them and I was like, you have never been in a class for a year. The pandemic has made our students do online learning 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, they're online on a screen, they're constantly on technology. They've never sat in a classroom. So I think with that, they just had so many emotions and they didn't know how to handle them. They didn't know how to be social with other kids. They didn't know what it was like to not be in front of a computer or to compare themselves to other people. So I was like, something needs to change. We need to do something for this. So, and with the way that our future is going, mindfulness is a big word. It's like one of the glitchy words. Everybody's talking about mindfulness. We're talking about mental health, and we should be. But if we're just talking about it and we're not teaching it, it's not going to have an impact on our students and their lives and our future. So I had 2 students in particular that came into my classroom. One student didn't know how to regulate her emotions. She was angry, so angry. And she spent 1 year prior to kindergarten on a computer learning. She didn't know how to interact with other people. She didn't know how to regulate her emotions or understand what was happening in her body when she was getting angry. So she would start to panic. She would start to throw chairs. She would start to hit. She had no idea. And then after she would do that, she would cry. She didn't know what was happening to her. And she was 5. Like, you don't expect her to know what's happening to her. But nobody taught her what was going through her body, what was going through her head, and what was happening to her. I had another student that, again, learned for a few years online, and he had no social interactions except for with his older brother. And his older brother loved to fight. So that's the way that they played. They played by fighting. So when this student went outside at recess, he would fight everybody, thinking that was play. And nobody wanted to be his friend. And he would come into the classroom and he would cry. He would think, nobody wants to be my friend. I'm trying to play with them. I'm fighting with them. That's not how you play. But you can't just tell a kid that's not how you play. They're not going to listen until they learn why and how to change that. So with the help of counselors, and counselors are amazing, but counselors have 200 students to look after. What's important is that we teach teachers how to bring this awareness in the classroom so that the kids are getting it everywhere, not just from counselors, but from teachers, principals, friends. So these 2 students were the catalyst of how I started daily mindfulness and daily meditation. So I would bring in daily meditation with my students. I would ring a bell like this, and then every day at 11 o'clock, I would ring the bell, and my students knew that was time to come to the carpet and that was time to breathe. And we would sit there in breath for 5 minutes. 5-year-olds can sit down for 5 minutes and sit quietly. They understood, it took time. It took some time to teach them that, but they understood that we don't touch anything around us. We don't touch people. We don't touch or talk to people, but you can fidget. You can count your fingers, you can close your eyes. But what they are learning is how to be in that moment and feel what is happening in their body. And then we would talk about it. I would ask my 5-year-olds, I would say, for those 5 minutes, how did you feel? What was going through your body? Oh, Miss Emily, I kind of was like squirmy. I couldn't do that. Okay, why? Why couldn't you? Why do you think? Oh, I was thinking about recess and what I'm going to play. Or I was thinking about, I want to play with Play-Doh instead. But through the year, they understood that, like, after many, many months of sitting quietly for 5 minutes, they could sit for 10 minutes and realize, oh, I'm focusing on my breathing, by just slowing that down, by focusing on one thing, I can sit here mindfully and understand more of what is going on with myself longer. Then after we would sit in meditation, my students would go and color for 10 minutes. And that coloring time was quiet. There was no talking, and that was hard at the beginning because students were like, I want the orange marker. I want the orange marker. I want the blue marker. But after a while, they sat there and they would quietly color for 15 minutes just to themselves. And what was interesting is I saw these students who in the beginning of the year were perfectionists. In the beginning of the year, they were rushers. They saw a task and they said, I have to be perfect at this. And if not, I fail. So when I gave a student a piece of art to color, if it wasn't perfect to them, their whole world would end. They were like, why? And they start shaking. They're like, this doesn't look good. I didn't have enough time to finish this picture. This is the anxiety that these students are having right now. They don't know how to regulate that. They don't understand why that's happening, why this perfection, this comparison. They don't understand that technology, our world is forcing these things on these kids. So after many months of asking them, you're coloring for the pleasure of coloring. You're coloring and you're sitting for the pleasure for you to get to know yourself and to slow down, to have no distractions. By the end of the year, they would sit there so quietly and just slowly color in their coloring page. Think about how those colors make them feel. And through that, it allowed them to give them the vocabulary to understand what is going on in their heads, what is going on in their bodies, and they could bring that awareness to the world around them. So I noticed that through daily mindfulness and through meditation and coloring, my students understand their breath and their connection to their breath, their connection to breathing. Because I don't know for you, but can anybody relate? When you are feeling angry, what happens to your breathing? Rapid, right? When you are sad, what happens to your breathing? Shallow. Like it's like, right? If you are happy, what's happening to your breathing? Yeah, it could be rapid. If you're calm, how is your breathing? Sometimes you might not even notice it because it's so calm, right?
Slow and steady.
It's slow and steady. And my students started to realize that their breath was the true indicator of how they felt. And they didn't understand that until they started to be more mindful and take the time to connect to their breath. So meditation is a wonderful way to connect to your breath. My students, again, they're kindergarten, they get angry all the time. They get sad all the time. They don't understand why. But when they started to recognize their breathing, oh, it's going fast, it's going fast, it's going fast. They paused and they're like, why? Oh, I must be feeling angry. 5-year-olds understand emotions, so I must be feeling angry. Okay, what can I do to fix this? What can I do to change this? Allowing students to have that awareness and allowing students to have that knowledge is so powerful. And I had one student in particular who was outside at recess, and there was an object behind a shed that she couldn't get. She got really frustrated. She got really angry because she couldn't get it, and I couldn't get it. It was beyond anything that we could reach. She started hyperventilating. She started getting sad and crying, and her hiccups were happening, and all of her friends kind of came around. And what was really special is that her friends didn't come up to her and say, "You're okay, like, come on, stop it, let's go play." They didn't try to take her out of the moment. Her friends sat with her and she was breathing quickly, and I sat with her and I said, "What do you notice?" And she's like, "I'm so sad." I said, "You are, like, why? You can see that. How do you feel sad?" "I can't breathe." "Yes, okay, so why?" And allowing her to navigate her breath, navigate her feelings. And her friends weren't forcing her into feeling anything else. They sat with her. They allowed her to do the process herself, which is the most important thing we can do for kids, is allowing them to get through things themselves rather than trying to force them to change into something else. And after a while of her just sitting there, she thought about it and she said, she took our breathing techniques, slow breathing, counting to 4, straw breathing, everything I've taught them, she did them, and then her breathing calmed down. What happened to her? She calmed down. The second her breathing started to calm, her emotions followed, and she started to calm. Then she could rationalize and say, "Oh, I can't catch this, I can't get that. That's okay. Let's move on. Let's go play something else." But if I walked in and I said, "Oh," and I tried to fix it myself for her, she never would have, she couldn't build that strength to fix it for herself. And she would just continue through life relying on other people to control her emotions. And I'm very passionate about students trying to understand their emotions, where they're coming from, how they feel it in their body. If we can do that, I truly believe the world will change. I truly believe that social media will have such a powerful impact on kids, because it does. In high school, you teach high school, it does. And it makes me really kind of scared for our littles that are coming into this world where it's just technology, online learning, everything, where they're not socializing, they're constantly distracted by so many things. There's very little time that they think about themselves. There's very little time that they are by themselves, where they're not distracted. Another thing I like to teach students is that feelings are valid. Any feeling is valid. If you're happy, that's wonderful. If you're sad, that's okay. Feel your sad, feel your anger, feel your happiness, feel it all, don't ignore it. Do not ignore how you feel. What's important is that you don't act upon those. So if you're angry, feel your anger, but what can you do so that you're not acting, you're not fighting, you're not throwing a chair? Recognize your anger, see how it feels in your body. Then what can you do to control that? What can you do that will work for you, that would help you understand how to navigate that world and come to a place of calm and come to a place of peace? And so my one student that was very angry, that did throw chairs, that did fight and hit other students, she started to feel in her fingers when she would get angry. And then she would look at me, she'd say, "Miss Emily," and she would feel it, and I'd say, "How are you feeling?" She said, "I'm angry." And her fingers would start to clench. I said, "What can you do right now?" And she would think about it, and she said, "Well, can I go sit over there and play with magnets?" I said, "I think that's a really good idea. Let's get you something that you can play with." And she would go by herself, and she would go and like just stick magnets and stare. And that was her way of being mindful. That was her way of connecting to herself. And that was her way of taking that anger and putting it into a peaceful environment, into a peaceful state. So both those students changed drastically throughout the year. And what came from that is that the classroom, the classroom environment, the dynamic changed a lot as well. My one student that thought fighting was a way of play, by the end of the year, everybody wanted to play with him because he understood, oh, you know, we don't do that. And we talked a lot about how to understand our emotions, but also understand, like Carlos said, other people's emotions. So mindfulness is, yes, connecting to yourself, but what my class needed to understand was that this one student in particular, he thought this was fun and playful and everything, but we need to understand that he's not aware yet. How can we help him? How can we be mindful for him? And so with words like "I feel" statements, or words like, "Oh, I feel angry when you try to play fight with me, so can we try something else?" "Oh, okay, yeah, that sounds good." Like my students were starting to use words like that by the end of the year, and hearing that on the playground shifted everything. It built a much more positive environment and a much more peaceful environment. And it's easier for teachers to have an environment like that. Not only does it help the students, it helps teachers, it helps the school environment, and it helps parents. And as a teacher, you know how important parents are in the community. And what I had a few parents contact me and email me and say how thankful they are that their kids are learning meditation, that their students are learning self-regulation, self-awareness. I had one parent who their son was good at everything. He was athletic, he was great with friends, he was artistic, everything. But he knew it, and he was a perfectionist. And if there was one little thing he wasn't good at, it would ruin his whole day. And he would hyperventilate, he would feel not good enough, he would feel sad. His dad emailed me and said, "Thank you so much. I noticed it at home when he might have a bad day at tennis. He would get angry and maybe he'd throw his racket." And what his son did was, he was at tennis practice, he got angry because he wasn't performing like he should, or like he thought he should. And he looked over at his dad and he said, I need a minute. And he just stood there and just thought about how he was feeling. And his dad said, what are you doing? He said, well, Miss Emily taught me how to meditate, and I think this is a time that I need to do that. And he sat there and I don't know for how long, and then he got back in and he said, okay, I can do it. And he went back in and started playing again. And his dad relayed this information to me. He's like, thank you. His dad is an MBA basketball coach or something in Beijing. And he said, this is what we need to bring to sports. This is what we need to bring to not only schools, to the world, is to teach people how to pause, to take that moment. So, in conclusion, if you can't tell, I'm very passionate about this, and I believe in a world that students and children don't feel the need to compare. They don't feel the need to be somebody that they aren't. They don't feel so much impact from social media and computers and the effects of online learning. I dream of a world where we can have schools that are open enough to teach emotional regulation, social emotional learning, mindfulness. And I think that the word mindfulness and I think the words meditation can have kind of a scary effect on it, because oftentimes it's linked to other things. It might be linked to religion, but it's not. It is just coming home. It's coming back to yourself. And we all need that as adults. Kids definitely need it more so than we think. So yeah.
I think too, you hit without saying it, talk about the parents and the parents'
Mhm.
importance to that. Sometimes I think that's part of the problem is that parents push the,
Yes.
gotta be better, gotta be
Of
better.
course.
We all do,
Yes.
we all try to push each other to get better all the way around.
Yeah.
But for them to be the top of the class, like not everybody's gonna be a pro basketball player or a coach or tennis star, or, everybody wants everybody to be all that. And
Right.
I think the parents put a lot of pressure on. So
Of course.
I think it's nice that they
completely
said
agree.
what they said.
Oh,
the
I
parents
know.
that
Especially
you.
with that parent, I was afraid. Like,
Yeah.
because as a teacher, you're always afraid of what parents might think, right? And you're like, I don't want to throw something on. And especially with that parent where they do value success in their child. I was kind of worried. I said, what are they going to think their children are doing in my class? They're coming around and sitting for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then coloring for 5-10 minutes. It's a waste of time. But the fact that they saw the value in that was really, really nice, because it is very powerful. But parents are so hard. on their
Yeah, they're the
children.
first
the first
teachers.
yeah.
And then for those 5 years, they want them to be good at everything and
Right.
have everything under control.
Yes.
Well, they're not 25-year-olds. They're
Yeah.
not gonna have it until they're maybe 30, they're not gonna get it. So
Right. And I think it's important because parents, sorry, hold on a second. I think it's important because parents want to obviously see their kids succeed, and they think success is being the top of the class or academics. Studies show that if you are practicing mindfulness and meditation, you are more empathetic, you're more focused in school. Therefore, success will come. It will come naturally. You'll find where it is. You'll have the motivation to want to succeed. You won't be drained. You won't be tired. You'll want to do it.
Can you talk about what the administration of the school thought about your classroom?
Okay, so actually, I pitched an idea to my school in January to have a wellness coach and me to be the wellness coach in schools. So I basically brought all these ideas and what I've been doing in the class, and I was really nervous because I didn't know how they would react to it. They loved it. They thought it was amazing. They thought it's the way the future is, and unfortunately, they could not fund me to be a separate position. But what that did is it was a trickle effect to bring mindfulness into our curriculum that they're going to be using this next upcoming school year. And through this, my ex-principal that was at the Canadian school in Beijing, she contacted me and asked if I could write an article for an international education magazine and then do an interview for it as well, so that it's published and out in the world. So I did that in April. A year ago. Yeah.
Can I ask if this is all done in English or is it all done in Chinese?
English. So it's an international school, so everything is in
So
English.
you do a lot of English,
Mhm.
but you have to learn the language a little bit.
Yes. So my students come from all over the world. English is our first, not their first language, but English is our first language at the school. So everything we do is in English. And there in particular, they studied Mandarin for one period.
Wow. Good to know, because I thought you were doing a lot of this in Chinese. which is gonna be-
I don't speak Chinese like that. We
So,
get through numbers and that's it.
Yes. Yes.
So Emily, what do you have in your future?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you have in your?
Yeah. What do you mean, not just rely?
You're gonna be in the house forever again?
Start reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This kind of opened doors and it just opened my mind to see what I might want to do. I love international school teaching. I love living abroad. Whether that's to look for another position next year, but it definitely made me want to work at a school that values this, and a school, and there are schools all over the world that do. Once summer is done, I want to take a few courses in mindfulness. There's a course from Thailand that is really great, and it's a curriculum that is used in some schools over in Thailand. So I want to take a few courses. And I have other visions, other things, but it will all come into place when it's meant to come into place. Yeah.
Nothing in the fire yet,
Yeah.
just visions
Just visions.
of sugar plums dancing.
Yeah.
Emily, you've taught in various places in the Far East. Would you rate them, how you enjoyed them, how you didn't, and what was good and bad, what was different learning environments?
She loves
Sure.
Italy best. She was in Italy for how long? 2
I
years?
was. No, I spent 3 summers for 4
3
months each year.
Oh, okay. Anyway,
I do love Italy. Okay.
The environment for teaching.
Right. Yes.
Did your blood pressure go up when Carla was talking?
I had to connect to
Mine
the
did.
screen. How am I feeling? So I'll start with Korea because that was the first one I started with. Korea, in terms of education, was difficult. I don't know if you know too much about the Korean education, but it's very intense, and that is a great place to bring mindfulness and meditation because when you talk about parent pressure, it is tenfold in Korea. It's so strict. Those kids are put under so much pressure, and I didn't like it. Like it was really, really hard for me to be there. Students were, so I taught in an after-school program there in Korea. I had a 13-year-old student that was known as gifted, and every student in Korea is gifted. So everyone's fighting for the top position. And I asked her about her daily schedule. I was like, what's your routine? She would wake up at 4 a.m. studying, stop studying at 7, go to school until 3, go to 6 after-school classes, English, math, violin, piano, such and such, wherever else. Even though she was the best of the best, she still went to all of these after-school classes. She would finish those after-school classes by 11 p.m., go home, do her homework, study for her everyday class, go to bed by 2, wake up at 4. Every day. She was 13. Like, I remember sitting there and being like, I can't teach you. I can't be a part of this and have you as one of my after-school class students when I know you're going through this. I can't. So loved Korea. I loved living there, but I didn't agree with the school system. So then I left and I went to Vietnam. Loved Vietnam. I worked at an international school there. I had a fantastic principal, and I think that having a fantastic principal changes the way a school is. I loved my principal, so the school was wonderful. Then the principal left and a new principal came in, and that posed some challenges. So my time in Vietnam was really, really wonderful. I enjoyed it, but I think I enjoyed the lifestyle of Vietnam more than my international school. I would say my school in China was wonderful. It was a great international school. It was an excellent school to learn a different curriculum, the IB curriculum. It was a stepping stone to get into some top schools in the world. Yeah, I would say the school in China, the Canadian school was.
And living in China?
Living in China was good. I unfortunately, the pandemic kind of brought some challenges there, but I loved living in China. Mom and dad came and they were thoroughly impressed. I had no intentions of moving to China. I never wanted to move to China. When my friend worked there, and so he asked me to come and work at the school. So I did, and I was so impressed. Beijing's a wonderful city. It has everything, and I got to travel China because I couldn't come home yet last year. So China is a gorgeous, beautiful country. But with the pandemic and everything, it was heavy. So yeah, good question. Thank you.
I had one, I just forgot what I was gonna ask.
Sure.
You know, that's
Sure.
me, that's me.
Emma, it's my job to thank you. Thank you so much. Actually, oh, there's a gift. I was
Whoa.
wondering if there was a gift. So, as a parent of 3, I'll try to implement, especially the parent of a 7-year-old. And congratulations for everything you've done so far, and congratulations on your future success. We're all rooting for you, and this was amazing. So
Thank you.
enjoy the gift, and thanks again.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
You have any children that you